You're listening to A Day Podcast. Podcast for all things creative. โรงเรียนนานาชาติ International School Podcast. Learning from the expats.
สวัสดีคุณผู้ฟังทุกท่านครับและขอต้อนรับเข้าสู่โรงเรียนนานาชาติครับผมเต้สุปจนกลิ่นสุวรรณนะครับมาพบกันอีกแล้วนะครับรายการที่จะได้พูดคุยกับ expat ครับชาวต่างชาติที่มาอยู่มาทำงานมาใช้ชีวิตหรือบางเคสมาเกษียณอยู่ที่ประเทศไทยนะครับแล้วก็เรียกว่ามีความโดดเด่นนะครับในเรื่องของแนวคิดผลงานนะฮะรวมถึงไลฟ์สไตล์ซึ่งเราจะมาแบ่งปันและก็ระหว่างทางนั้นแน่นอนครับได้เรียนรู้ภาษาอังกฤษไปด้วยกันอย่างแน่นอนสำหรับวันนี้ครับแขกรับเชิญของเราครับเป็นหนุ่มออสเตรเลียนคนหนึ่งซึ่งเรียนทางด้านศิลปะมาโดยตรงนะครับเขาคนนี้ครับเคยเป็นระดับผู้จัดการนะฮะในเรื่องของสมาชิกสำหรับศูนย์ภาพยนตร์แห่งชาติออสเตรเลียนะครับเรียกว่าเป็นคนที่คลั่งไคล้ภาพยนตร์มาแต่ไหนแต่ไรแล้วนะครับในเรื่องของศิลปะแขนงต่างๆนั้นภาพยนตร์คือที่สุดของเขาแล้วและความฝันของเขาก็คือการได้มาเปิดสิ่งนี้เขานิยามว่าเป็น Indie Art House นะครับเรียกว่าเป็นเฮาส์ศิลปะแบบอินดี้นะครับโดยที่ถ้าใครมีโอกาสนะฮะได้รับรู้เรื่องราวของภาพยนตร์แนวอินดี้หรือภาพยนตร์ที่เรียกได้ว่าเป็นภาพยนตร์ทางเลือกจะเรียกอย่างนั้นก็คงไม่ผิดซะทีเดียวนะครับเขาคนนี้ครับคือเจ้าของ Bangkok Screening Room นะครับอยู่ที่ศาลาแดงนี่เองนะครับตอนนี้นั่งอยู่กับเราแล้วขอต้อนรับครับคุณ Nicholas Hudson Ellis ครับสวัสดีครับ
สวัสดีครับ
สวัสดีครับ Thank you so much for coming on the show Nicholas Can I call you Nicholas
For sure thank you
or Nick
Nicholas is fine
or N
Either's good I answer to all
Nicholas is good all right so this Bangkok Screening Room all right, this movie theaters of yours, right, with a 52 seat is now down to half due to COVID.
That's right 24 seats so it makes it even more intimate sometimes when films are very popular like the National Theatre Fleabag show that we're doing now that will sell out so sometimes people are more likely to miss out on tickets which makes it a bit harder for the cinema to survive but it also
and it makes it even more interesting as well.
That's true. Yeah. The ticket's even more rare.
Exactly. All right. So let's go back a bit. All right. So you were born and raised in Australia.
That's right. I was,
Melbourne.
I was born in Sydney. I went to university in Sydney and then moved to Melbourne for work.
I see. Right. So what is it with you and movies, moving images?
I guess like many people growing up, I've always just been a bit of a movie fan. And I became more interested in art house films when I went to university to study photography and art. And then moving to Melbourne, I was lucky to get a job at the Australian Centre for the Moving Image, working in the gallery, just helping people around the building.
Right.
And then eventually being the memberships manager. And it gave me a real appreciation for how a large organisation works that has a cultural focus to promote a certain type of artwork like film. And it was always kind of a dream to have a independent film-focused organisation that was not on the same large scale as a government museum, but as an independent small art project.
So a bit indie kind of.
That's right, yeah.
Right. How would you see outstanding points of films compared to other forms of art?
It's a good question. I think the concept that people often describe as film being so popular is that it's great at combining aspects of other types of art. So you can get the stories from novels or great literature. You get the music from wonderful musicians and orchestras. And you also get the craft of costumes and architecture and design, and it brings them all together in a real experiential, emotional format. So I think that's the thing that makes it the most interesting.
Okay, so that's how you fell in love with moving images or film.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So how did you end up in Thailand in the first place?
Well, when I was in Sydney working at the Museum of Contemporary Art in the gallery, I met another young art worker called Sarinya, and we started a relationship and fell in love and got married.
Yeah.
And when we moved to Melbourne together, we were just talking about doing projects outside of our arts government jobs. And Sarinya was originally from Bangkok,
Yeah.
And we'd come to Bangkok a few times, and it just seemed like a really great city that had a love of art and film, but didn't have the same type of independent art pop-ups around film that we saw in Sydney and Melbourne. So we wanted to try and bring that to Bangkok.
Right. Ever thought of starting that kind of business first in Australia, and after it being very what's the word, successful, say, and then move to Thailand?
We did, but Melbourne and Sydney also have lots of other big arts organizations. There's major film festivals. There's lots of museums. There's centers for film. There wasn't the same need in Sydney and Melbourne, and we thought we could offer something that was unique to the city in Bangkok that wouldn't be unique in Melbourne.
All right. So that was 2016 when you decided to come to Thailand and start this business.
It was a couple of years before that.
Oh, okay.
Of course, we did 2 pop-up projects in the 2 years before Bangkok Screening Room.
Yeah.
The first one was the Open Reel Rooftop Film Festival in Prakanong in the W District. And then when we did that, we decided that we wanted to open a permanent cinema. So we started a 2-year process of planning and finding the right space.
Right.
And then in the middle of that, we did a pop-up cinema in 2015 at Wonderfruit. And then the year after that, 2016, was the launch of Bangkok Screening Room.
I see. Now, this podcast doesn't go with any images, or in your case, any moving images, which we truly apologize, all right? This is all audio. So if you were to help the listeners who are now listening without any help of any images, try to understand or see the picture of how this theater of yours, this indie art house called the Bangkok Screening Room, would kind of look like, feel like, and what would they encounter if they go in? Can you?
Sure.
Yeah.
So we're lucky to be in a creative building called the Wolfpack Building, which is in Saladang, Soi 1. And there's a couple of different alley side entrances. And if you look around, you can see some signs pointing up to BKKSR. And if you follow some stairways up, you'll come to the second level, which is this large open space gallery.
Yeah.
And there's exhibitions that are often there. And at the end of the gallery, you'll see a white neon sign that says BKKSR. And you step through those doors, and then you're in our foyer. And there's a large cinema-style marquee above the box office. And there's some wonderful blue velvet couches and lounges that were designed by our other founder, Men, who has a design consultancy.
Yeah.
And then if you step further to the left, you'll see a balcony where you can look out onto Lumpini Park. And if you go left again, you'll step into the screening room, which has 52 seats and a large widescreen.
Right. So you have one screening room.
One screen, that's right.
A theater with only one screen, one viewing room.
Correct. One
Sweet.
screen.
Very indie.
Very indie. We try and have our box office staff describe it as intimate instead of small, but it is relatively small compared to...
I like the word intimate. Yeah, personal,
Yes,
of course,
that's right.
of course. Right. So what kind of movies do you guys show?
A real variety. We try and focus on what sometimes people call specialty film. So independent films, classic movies, documentaries. We try and provide a platform for all of the independent Thai films.
Yeah.
So whenever a director like Prabda Yun has a new movie, we'll try and screen that. So his last film, Someone from Nowhere and Motel Mist, we screened. Pim Parker's films, we try and screen.
I see. So what's the feedback so far?
It's great. People love Thai independent film. They also respond well to classic film.
Yeah.
We have a lot of really great local cultural partners like the Goethe Institute and the French Embassy. So we're doing, with the Goethe Institute, a retrospective on Klaus Kinski and Werner Herzog.
Okay.
So we're doing his remake of the 1920s Nosferatu film. And people really like those Klaus Kinski films.
Right. Now, these indie films, compared to the mainstream, like we're talking Avengers or Hollywood big funded movies. I mean, what's the difference? The big difference, besides the budget, of course, in these movies.
I think it's about having a deeper, richer experience that makes you think. When you watch one of the big superhero movies, it's like going on an amusement park ride. You don't need to think. You don't need to try and work anything out. It's just been assaulted by the images and the sound. Which is not to say that some of the superhero movies aren't interesting and have cool stories. And also some of the big cinemas are also screening what might be called art house films. And in the last 4 years since we've opened, we've seen some of the bigger cinemas do that a bit more. Like with some of the classic films. And I think major Cineplex is bringing back some Wong Kar-wai movies soon.
Wong Kar-wai, yeah.
So I think the idea of having specialty art house and classic movies on the big screen has sort of come back into fashion.
I see. So
in the last 4 years.
Prior to COVID, is this what you kind of had in mind when you left Australia, grabbed hold of your wife and started this project? Is this exactly what you kind of dreamed of?
Basically, well, we kind of grabbed a hold of each other or the other way around. And the idea was that the business would be able to be independent through a few different ways, partly from the bar, partly from being a great venue. So we're lucky to be a great venue for organizations that want to hire for public cultural events. So the Goethe Institute might hire us for a German Film Week. So that supports the Bangkok Screening Room, but it also provides great movies for the public.
I see.
The Irish Embassy for 3 years in a row has had the Irish Film Festival at Bangkok Screening Room, which has been great.
Right. How about the majority of Thais? Are they into like these kind of indie movies?
Yeah, for sure.
As much as you anticipated?
Yeah, definitely. There's a really big Thai cinephile community, and one of the things that we decided early on was that every film that we screen, we would commission Thai subtitles. Which not all pop-up cinema projects do. Like often when you go to a sort of a non-traditional cinema that is doing international art house films, they'll just either have no subtitles or maybe English and not bother. But we decided right from the start that it would be part of the brand, that it's a cinema for Thai movie lovers.
Right.
First and foremost.
I see. You're in love with movies since your childhood. You run your own cinema. Why not do your own scripts, write your own, storyboards, or even produce your own movies?
I guess they say do what you're good at. So I'm not sure that I would be the best filmmaker, but I feel like my talents are more in providing the platform and doing the film curation. All
right. Now, from your answer, what does it take to become a good film director, and what does it take? What are the elements to make a good film?
Well, all I know is from what I hear from filmmakers, and the theme that seems to be common is that they love film and that they try and watch everything. So I tell young filmmakers that want to show their films at our cinema that they should just watch as many films as possible. Watch Werner Herzog movies from the 80s, watch current comedies. I saw the new Thai comedy Mother Gamer, and just to be kind of always hungry and thirsty for new types of movie and to watch widely.
Right.
And also, I guess the other thing is just to be a real collaborator. All of the great filmmakers that I love, they all have great collaborators. They have a close team of different cinematographers and actors that they work again and again with. I see. So I think just being generous and having good collaborators and good communication.
So there's no such thing as like one of those one-size-fit-all formulas to create a good film?
I don't think so. I think it's good that there's lots of different types of movies.
Right.
Different directors have different ways of working, and sometimes it's harder for some directors than others. But yeah, there's lots of different approaches to make great films.
I see. Do you watch Thai films?
I do, yeah.
You do? Right. So what do you think of them?
I love them. The Thai art house scene is really good. I don't get to watch enough of the more mainstream films, but films like Mother Gamer or the more recent Noah movies are really, really wonderful. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So by watching Thai movies, I assume that your Thai is very fluent in listening and speaking, if not writing.
Not so much. That's one of my goals this year, is actually to get more comfortable with reading and speaking Thai, and definitely watching more Thai movies will be part of that plan.
I see. Now, in the long term, how do you see your business expand?
Well, it's all kind of changed in the COVID world, but
Yeah.
originally the plan was that we would have Bangkok Screening Room, and then if that was a successful model, then we could expand it. Maybe there's, Chiang Mai Screening Room, Phuket Screening Room.
I see.
And then when we were getting really ambitious, maybe there's, then there's Hong Kong Screening Room and Saigon Screening Room, things like that. But it's kind of been put on hold
Yeah.
this year, so we'll see if we can just keep Bangkok Screening Room
Thanks
above
to the
water.
virus, huh?
That's right.
Right. So now, if I were an independent movie maker, just fresh off the boat from the university, and I want to make an indie movie and showcase at your place, what do I have to do?
Well, I guess the first thing is just to make the movie, and then the next step, which some people don't always have in their plan, is just basic things like government censorship. So every Thai movie that wants to show in cinemas has to go through the government
Yeah.
censorship program,
Yeah.
which is something that we can do for overseas films that we bring in. So if there's an American movie that we want to screen, we will do that on behalf. But if it's a Thai movie, that has to all be down to the Thai filmmaker.
Right. Are the censorship people ferocious in Thailand? I would use that word, ferocious. ดุดันโหดไหม
Not in our experience. Foreign movies, I think, tend to have an easier time. I think I'll probably leave it to the Thai filmmakers to describe their own experiences in going through that process. Obviously, certain topics will be more highly scrutinized than others.
Of course. So what have you learned so far in doing business here in Thailand, coming up with a business model where we are very indie and don't have any like major sponsors behind you or any big supporters, right? I mean,
Not really.
Big brands.
Occasionally, we will have a special film festival and we'll have a special sponsor.
I see.
So, for example, we had our FEM Film Festival to celebrate International Women's Day and Female Directors.
I see.
And we were lucky to have Converse come on to sponsor the Thai film translation. But only for special events, not an ongoing corporate sponsor.
I see. So what would you say is the most important thing that you've learned coming and living in Thailand and running a business here?
I think it's just the commonality between different audiences when it comes to film and movie lovers. That every major center has similar benefits and challenges.
Yeah.
That people will always love movies and they'll always want to see their own stories on screen and also to learn about the stories of people in other parts of the world.
I see.
And organizations always struggle to do independent art projects.
Right. So far, what has been your most successful film that's been shown at the Bangkok Screening Room? In terms of ticket sales, let's say.
In terms of ticket
that's
sales?
the definition of success for me, I guess.
It's probably the American art house movie Columbus, the one about the American architecture student having a romance on campus. That was really good. The other really popular movie was a cooperation that we did with the Goethe Institute, and that was the young Karl Marx, which was about the start of the revolution in Russia,
Right.
and how Karl Marx met his writing partner Engels and wrote the Communist Manifesto. So we had lots of political fans who wanted to learn more about that story.
Right.
And that was hugely popular.
Right.
And I think that probably speaks to the other aspect of films that Thai movie lovers are interested in, which is history, and especially at the moment with all this focus on Thai history, and some people wanting to have a different perspective on history.
Right.
So I think people were interested in how history sits in the story of a state.
I see. Now, in this day and age, do independent movie producers still have to rely on cinema where they could, go on YouTube or even if they're good enough, go on even Netflix? I mean, do they still need a location?
I think it depends on the kind of film. art house films, there is still, I think, such a reliance on the infrastructure of the international festival circuit, and support at that international level. So there'll be great Thai film directors that will go to these film labs overseas. And then when it gets time to exhibition, I think theatrical still gives a portion, but it won't pay for the whole budget. So Thai films will still come out in cinemas, and there are great Thai distributors that will support independent Thai movies, like the Documentary Club and HAL will work with Thai directors to distribute their movies.
Now, prior to COVID-19, what would you say were the biggest obstacles in running your business? I mean, did you have to fight the big players like SF or Major EGV?
Not really. We kind of don't see them as really competitors. I think I think we kind of exist more in the art, lifestyle, leisure space rather than the mass entertainment. So I think when people are coming to Bangkok Screening Room, they might be also thinking of going to a design fair or to an exhibition. We see it more in that space. But the biggest challenge, I think, is what every creative organization has, and that's just getting the word out about different events, and working out how to do cost-effective advertising for a product that is really low margin.
Right.
So just basic things like working out how to do Facebook ads, how to reach out to organizations that might be interested in a certain movie, people who are fans of a certain actor or director that might not know that the movie's on. Often people will just email us out of the blue and say, oh, you should screen this movie, which we may have screened like 2 months earlier, and they just didn't know about it. So just letting people know is the hardest thing.
Right. But then there's the issue of demand and supply. So out of 22, how many seats?
24 seats
24
with COVID.
seats, right. Out of 24 seats, if a movie is not as popular or not as, let's say, the word doesn't get out, all right? And then, there's a risk of kind of not having a full house, right? But then again, if a very successful movie, a movie where people want to watch, but then you only have 24 seats, I mean, how will you manage that problem?
It's a big challenge. And even before COVID, not every session sold out. So sometimes it doesn't matter. Like if there's only a certain number of people that are interested in a movie, with the reach, it doesn't matter. But I think like other similar businesses like ours, you kind of rely on the big hits to sort of cover the less popular movies.
I see.
So if you have a really popular movie, but you can only make 50% of the total income, that makes it harder for it to cover the less popular movies.
I see.
So it just creates, just makes it more challenging overall.
All right. Knock on wood. Hoping it doesn't happen. If, say, on a rainy day, one person shows up, buys one ticket to watch that movie, will you cancel the show and give the money back, or just you should still show it?
No, we would never cancel a session. If one person shows up, that's great. That means that one person can enjoy that movie.
Right. Nice. How about the younger generation, the high school students? Are they kind of into this kind of art form as well?
They are. We have lots of students that come to see the films, often in the senior classes in high school or the first year of university. So we often have people come in their uniforms to see the movie, especially on the half price Wednesday tickets. So there's a real appetite in young students for cinema, especially when they know that every film will have Thai subtitles. That's important.
Right. What kind of genre would really sell in today's indie movie market in Thailand?
I think the good thing about indie cinema is that there's not really one genre. There's independent romances, there's dramas, there's historical epics, there's documentaries about lots of different concepts and people. And I think that's just what people want. They want different experiences. It's not the same, I think, as the mainstream cinema where there will be giant trends like superheroes or westerns where there'll be a certain trend over years where there's people at the executive producing level that are making large financial decisions based on the last 5 years of movie trends. When an independent filmmaker is choosing their movie, they're just choosing what they're interested in at that moment in time.
Right. Besides showcasing art, one very interesting aspect that the Bangkok Screening Room is doing is also supporting the artists. Right. I understand that a big portion of the income goes back to the producers.
Oh, the filmmakers, for sure. So we have a 50% split.
Wow.
On all of our on most of the films. Some of the overseas films can be a bit more expensive. But when we're looking at Thai movies, we just do a straight 50% split. So all of the translation expenses and marketing, we pay for all that. We don't pass that on to the filmmakers.
Yeah.
I think sometimes some of the bigger chains might be a bit more controlling over the finances, but we try and keep it really simple and just have it be an equal share.
Right. If you could go back, back in 2014, where you with your wife came to Thailand and started, the screening, would you still do what you've done so far and accomplishing to this point?
Absolutely. It's been an amazing experience. Building the cinema and meeting all of the people in the Thai independent movie scene and working with overseas distributors and just learning how to run a business. Before this, I always worked in government arts jobs, so this was the first time that we were responsible for a business and had staff and had to worry about making sure that the business could always be there to pay the staff and to survive.
I would say countless people, especially the younger generation, have a dream. They want to follow that dream. But then again, there's that little question of, will I make it? Will I survive? Will I be able to make money and support myself? You, as a successful example of doing this indie art house of yours, what would you like to tell them? Those people who are pursuing their dreams.
I think it's just to not assume something's impossible and to explore the idea and to realize that when you look at a business like Bangkok Screening Room, that there was like 3-4 years in planning and conversations. We aren't wealthy people. We put all of our money into the cinema. And if the cinema doesn't continue because of COVID, we will have to quickly try and find some other job. We can't just live the ISO lifestyle and just move on to other projects. It's a business that we run to pay our own rent as well. If someone is trying to do a similar type of creative business, I think I would just encourage them just to talk to as many people in whatever field it is. It's a bit of a cliche, but networking is really important, but it doesn't have to be a cynical, cold style networking. Networking is just finding out more about the area that you're interested in and learning people's stories and making friends and being there to support other people who are doing their projects as well. So it's about really being part of your community, and we're just lucky, I think, that the film community is really tightly connected and friendly, especially in Bangkok.
Now, of all these years living and doing business in Thailand, what is the most interesting thing or the most important thing that you've learned?
I think it's probably just the human connection and to treat everyone with empathy and understanding, whether you're speaking to a famous film director or the person that brings the ice or the beer to the bar. That everyone has a really important role, and to just be empathetic and compassionate with everybody.
Right. What is it that the Thai independent movie producers or makers are now lacking? What kind of support?
Well, something that I think about a lot is the fact that there's no major Bangkok Film Festival. I think that's a real lack for independent filmmakers and producers in Thailand. When there's a major, well-funded, popular, supported film festival in a city, it becomes a really important film institution. It becomes a film market for filmmakers to sell films. They'll do annual large industry events. They'll do workshops. They'll provide platforms for short filmmakers to show their films to large audiences.
Right.
And I've seen that in Sydney and Melbourne. Those large film festivals are really important. They also provide lots of jobs. So they're big organizations. So there's lots of, marketing jobs, ticketing jobs, advertising jobs for young people. It provides this whole infrastructure of support, but also just economic activity around film.
Right.
And I think it's a real shame that Thailand doesn't have that.
Right. Is language an obstacle? As in, like, if Thai indie movie producers were to make movies in English, would that like increase revenue, make more sales, get more audiences?
Do you mean internationally for overseas markets?
Market,
I don't think so. I think when people have a hunger for international films, they want to have that authentic experience. Like they want to hear a Thai story in Thai. When people want to learn about French cinema or Chinese cinema, they don't want to see a French movie in English or a Russian movie in English. They want to hear that language. They want that texture of that country.
Right.
When they see like the last Nepal movie, they want to see a designer in an old Thai shop talking about their family in Thai and learn those Thai stories. So I think it's a benefit. It's not a disadvantage.
Okay. So before we say goodbye, you want to share with us your lineup for the last quarter of 2020?
For sure.
Yeah.
So we recently started a collaboration with the Documentary Club. So we're in the middle of that for October.
Yeah.
With Fahrenheit 11.9 Sanita and RBG about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who recently passed. That screens till the end of the month. And we've also got the Korean movie The Woman Who Ran, directed by Hong Sang-soo. And we've also got a classic Japanese movie, Onibaba, which is one of our Halloween movies, the 60s horror movie by Kanete Shindo.
Yeah.
And we have some movies coming up at the end of the year, including the First and Last Men in November, which is narrated by Tilda Swinton.
Okay. So thank you so much for sharing all this with us Nicholas ก็นะฮะเมื่อกี้คือรายชื่อนะครับหนังคร่าวๆนะครับที่มีการเรียกว่าตั้งกำหนดการฉายไว้แล้วนะฮะในช่วงปลายปีนี้ตั้งแต่กลางตุลาคมเป็นต้นไปเชื่อเหลือเกินว่าทาง Bangkok Screening Room เนี่ยคงจะมีการจัดเตรียมนะฮะภาพยนตร์อินดี้ไว้อีกเยอะๆมากๆเลยนะฮะหนังคุณภาพนะครับโดยคนตัวเล็กๆที่อยากจะสื่อสารนะอยากจะแสดงออกเพียงแค่เราได้ให้พื้นที่เขานะครับแล้วก็มีการจัด business model ที่ว่านะเขาอยู่ได้เราอยู่ได้ทุกคนมีความสุขนะฮะแล้วก็สนุกไปกับการดูหนังแบบอินดี้วันนี้ต้องขอบคุณมากเลยครับ Thank you so much Nicholas
ขอบคุณมากครับ
ขอบคุณครับ
ติดตาม A Day Podcast ได้ทาง adaymagazine.com Joox Apple Podcast Spotify Podbean SoundCloud และ A Day Magazine YouTube Channel